Taymor McIntyre, more commonly known as Tay-K, or Tay-K 47, was an up-and-coming rapper hailing from Arlington, a city in Dallas, Texas. Weak foundations really played a role in shaping Taymor McIntyre into the person who he eventually became. Raised in foster care for most of his childhood, Taymor and his sister bounced from family to family, with Taymor rarely seeing his mother and father, the latter being incarcerated for most of his youth. Once his father was released from prison, he packed his bags and moved with Taymor to the city of Arlington, Texas. The move provided a new environment for Taymor, but it came with a cost. An abusive home environment had caused the then 15-year-old Taymor to run away from home. Trapped in the foster care system, it was inevitable that Taymor would struggle throughout his daily life. He didn't attend school because of his situation, and focused his energy toward creating music. Music gave Taymor an outlet, and one of his inspirations was rapper Young Pappy, a man whom I've touched on in my video on Lil Sean, another Chicago rapper. With no financial and little emotional support in his life, Taymor often couch surfed. Him and his sister were completely homeless, as by now, their father and mother were completely out of the picture. Whilst his sister worked to obtain an apartment, Taymor performed and collaborated with other artists. To his credit, many artists supported him when it came to his music career, which was only really just beginning. Taymor continued to perform at small venues, until his infamous July 2016 case landed him in hot water. 2 cars rolled into a suburban Texas neighborhood, with the 7 occupants having already devised a scheme to commit a home invasion-style robbery of a known trap house. The 7 young people were Latharian Merritt, Sean Robinson, Jalen Bell, Megan Holt, Ariana Barrett, and 2 16-year-olds named Taymor McIntyre, and a blonde female referred to as MS. Each member had a role to play, and the group had premeditated what they believed was going to be a fairly lucrative robbery. Insider information had proven informative for the group, with one of the girls, the 16-year-old girl dubbed MS, having been currently dating the homeowner's son, 17-year-old Zachary Belight. This 16-year-old white girl was really the mastermind behind the whole operation, and claimed that a guy was needed for the robbery. Later on, it would be claimed that she was a human trafficking victim, who had been physically tortured, and coerced into taking part in the robbery, by Ariana Barrett, and a local Mac. This 16-year-old proposed the robbery, with Megan Holt hiring Taymor McIntyre, who then recruited Latharian Merritt, Sean Robinson, and Jalen Bell. Like Taymor, MS was only a teenager, but was fully aware of the comings and goings of the residents, and knew the home's layout, both inside and out. Truthfully, she was more dangerous than the other group members. She had intimate knowledge of Belight, and knew that he had a roommate, 21-year-old Ethan Walker. Both had been selling small amounts of product from the residence. Prepping themselves in the 2 vehicles, the 7 closely monitored the residence on Aspen Court. 2 of the males carried handguns, whilst Taymor McIntyre reportedly clutched onto a pair of brass knuckles in the car. Anticipating an easy lick, the group were feeling excited, as their adrenaline increased by the second. The tension must have been palpable. Heart rates through the roof, everyone assumed that this was going to be a straightforward robbery, and everyone was eager to make a fast buck. The group had decided that 2 of the females would enter the house and communicate with the men sitting in the cars, relaying information about where everything was stashed, and who was present, via text messaging. They were at the residence under the guise of spending time with Zachary, and his roommate, a father of a young girl, who was named Ethan Walker. Whilst the 2 girls texted the guys outside, Zachary became suspicious of their behavior. They were moving around a lot, and were likely jittery, acting nervous. Furthermore, he had seen another female in one of the cars parked outside, who was then brought into the house by the 2 girls. Feeling uneasy, he didn't realize that the girls had left the front door unlocked, with one even unlocking the garage door. The robbery was all set, and the countdown to tragedy began. Merritt and Robinson burst into the residence wearing masks, shouting and waving handguns. Taymor followed behind. They yelled for everyone to get on the ground, whilst McIntyre, who didn't have a weapon anymore, went into the living room and flipped over a couch. Desperately searching for the stash, he found nothing. Frustrated, he heard gunshots from another room. What was going on? Whilst McIntyre had been flipping the couch, Merritt and Robinson grew impatient, with Robinson physically striking, and then shooting Zachary in the shoulder. Moreover, Merritt then followed suit, shooting Ethan Walker. Walker passed away at the scene. Fortunately, Zachary made it out alive, but not before witnessing complete betrayal from his girlfriend. Probably spooked by the actions of the 2 shooters, the group ransacked valuable items within the house, like a few watches, and mobile phones of the victims. The robbery had gone wrong, and with 2 victims bleeding out, the crew dashed to the 2 cars, speeding away in the dead of night. Emergency services received the call of a shooting, with a witness saying that she had seen 3 young women make a dash from the house. They had driven away in a white sports utility vehicle. As mentioned, Zachary survived the shooting, and as he recovered in the hospital, he informed police about his girlfriend before giving police her address. Detectives soon learned that the girl had arrived home between 11 and 11:30 on the night of the murder. She had informed her brother that she had hit a lick, and that it went bad. Police wanted to speak to her, so her mom drove her down to the police station. At first, she lied to police, making up a fake story of events. However, she inevitably came clean in the end, incriminating the whole squad by sending emails and photographs of their pictures, and street names. The 16-year-old girl really played the victim card, taking no accountability for her actions whatsoever. All loyalty went out the window when Megan Holt cooperated against the group, verifying the identity of Merritt to police. She had picked him out, with the same photograph provided to them by the 16-year-old girl. Latharian Merritt later received life imprisonment. Megan Holt received 20 years in prison, Ariana Barrett was given 25 years, Jalen Bell was handed down 30 years, and Sean Robinson was rammed with 40 years. A video later emerged from the courtroom of Jalen Bell's sentencing. Bell was a close friend of Taymor, and went by the rap name Pimpy Z. The footage is painful because a young man loses his freedom to the justice system, with his mother being heard crying in the background. Dallas police had pieced the crime together in short succession, and had arrested all but 2 members of the group who had committed the robbery, which resulted in the death of Ethan Walker. Through cooperation, McIntyre, who was one of the 2 members still free, had been informed on by some of the locked-up members. Taymor McIntyre and Jalen Bell were apprehended following a public tip. Being that McIntyre was 16, and Jalen Bell was also underage, they were taken to the Mansfield Public Safety Building, a dedicated juvenile processing facility by local agreement with Tarrant County. It was here that both youths were read their Miranda rights and separately interviewed about the fatal robbery. McIntyre was put into interview room 4, with Bell being put into a room across the hall. 2 detectives interviewed McIntyre. McIntyre was given a bottled water, and some cheese crackers, as the police played the friendly ruse with him. McIntyre had been accused of, or was considered a witness to a capital murder. Unfortunately for McIntyre, he succumbed to the acting, opening his mouth and talking to the detectives. He was told that people in the case were pointing him out, and was asked to give his side of the story. Likely feeling afraid, and still being young, he began talking. His story went from him placing himself at the crime scene, initially being a person who just sat in a car outside, to actually going inside the residence. Detectives have a job to do, and they could just bide their time, coaxing more information out of McIntyre, who was just digging a deeper hole for himself. Following the interview, Taymor McIntyre was placed into the custody of Tarrant County Juvenile Services. They were informed that McIntyre had engaged in delinquent conduct by committing the offenses of capital murder and aggravated robbery. Taymor McIntyre was freed from juvenile detention, and was ordered to wear an electronic monitoring device. His charges were severe, but he was fortunate enough not to be inside a cell like his co-defendants. He resided with his sister, with people in the music scene frequently visiting him. They provided him with microphones, music assistants, and creative ideas. Sick of being restricted by an ankle monitor, McIntyre cut it off and went on the run with his fellow co-defendant Pimpy Z. Soon, juvenile services were informed of the ankle monitor situation, and law enforcement was told to be on the lookout for the young capital murder suspects. Police monitored Taymor's sister at her apartment, but couldn't find her brother. Taymor McIntyre was apprehended by the U.S. Marshals in New Jersey. He had been at a recording studio, apparently recording the vocals for his most viewed video titled, "The Race." The song blew up, gaining instant popularity online. Whilst the song grew in numbers, Taymor was returned to the custody of Tarrant County Juvenile Services in Texas. Many high-profile rappers would begin to support the artist, latching onto the catchiness of the song. Whilst incarcerated, McIntyre was hit with an aggravated robbery charge from May 2017, involving the pistol whipping and subsequent robbery of an elderly man in a park. McIntyre had been on the run when this robbery took place, and the victim, 65-year-old Oni Pepe, had identified the young man as being responsible. For this crime, McIntyre was sent to the custody of the Tarrant County Sheriff. Probably because of his sudden superstar status, the state wanted more severe punishment for McIntyre. The state was awarded with a transfer petition. McIntyre was transferred over to Tarrant County Criminal District Court No. 2. The next day, and McIntyre was being charged with 1 count of capital murder, and 3 counts of aggravated robbery, in connection with the home invasion. Tay-K was hit with an additional murder charge for the killing of photographer Mark Saldivar. Tay-K was allegedly present when the 23-year-old was killed during another attempted robbery. This happened whilst Tay-K was on the run in April of 2017. As of the time of this video, he is still awaiting trial for this case. The big day was finally here, and Taymor McIntyre would plead not guilty to the charges of capital murder and aggravated robbery causing bodily injury by shooting with a firearm. Instead, he pled guilty to 2 counts of aggravated robbery by threatening with a firearm. In the end, a jury found McIntyre guilty of murder and aggravated robbery, causing bodily injury by shooting with a firearm. He was sentenced to 55 years for the murder, 30 years for the aggravated robbery convictions, and 13 years for each of the 2 remaining convictions. The sentence was run concurrent, meaning that McIntyre has to serve 55 years in the Texas Department of Corrections. Tay-K would suffer a painful reality check, being sentenced to such an enormous amount of time. He later complained about his fellow 16-year-old co-defendant being given such a lenient sentence, and I agree, it was wrong that she was spared when everyone else was buried under the prison. However, he hasn't taken accountability for any of his crimes, and deserves to be locked up. In spite of his awful upbringing, laws are laws. Regardless of how bad your situation is, you are not immune to being punished by the justice system, and Tay-K crashed out, becoming yet another number within the TDC. Although some may feel pity for Tay-K, many do not. By recklessly robbing people, you are putting yourself in a dangerous position. Before you make a decision, think it through. It could spare you a sentence like this young man. Rest in peace to Ethan Walker and Mark Saldivar.